everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex and this is Big Baby Reviews. Check out my comics, Big Baby and STARCRASHER at KINGCOMICS.CA. So today, guys, is Jack Kirby Day. We're taking a look at Mr. Miracle number 5, the next issue in the whole Fourth World Saga from the early 70s. This is from December 1971. And once again, we've got Mr. Miracle caught in a death trap. Obviously a trope that's, fully tied into the character and what he's all about. I've often wondered as we go along throughout these issues, if at some point that trope is going to get a little bit tired and if maybe Mr. Miracle is going to move into more of kind of just a general adventure kind of setting. As we go through these reviews, I'll be trying to keep track of that. I read all of these years ago, so I don't remember exactly, but as I reread them, we'll be keeping, again, track of that. Pretty cool cover. Once again, a death trap, but with many more kind of things to menace Mr. Miracle, and it's described like a diabolical car wash. It traps you on the way in and kills you on the way out. It's mechanized murder. So trapped in some sort of Iron Maiden with his head sticking out, he's being brought through kind of like, again, a car wash or a roller coaster. And on this cover, obviously, we can see a lot of danger in his way. We've got the huge axe here. We've got an actual A-bomb going towards him, a knife. We've got a flamethrower down here, right? And I'm sure there's other stuff off panel. And we're going to be introduced to the villain of the piece. Enjoy your trip on Dr. Wunderbar's murder machine. And Dr. Wunderbar, definitely that German-sounding name, probably most likely influenced by Nazi villains, right? Kirby, every once in a while, will pull that out. And, even though the character's not explicitly a Nazi, you can see the inspiration from it, which totally understandable. We're at this point, we're 26 years after the war. Kirby was in the war, so it makes sense he would take some inspiration from that. I want to talk a little bit about collected editions too, as this is the original issue, and I do prefer looking at those. But, I've seen some debate online as far as, reissues and how they're colored and this and that. There's advantages and disadvantages to both and different points of view on that, right? So if I show you real quick, what I like about the reprinted edition here in this omnibus is that the art is framed properly, right? So here on the cover, you can probably tell also big, beautiful, dangerous Big Barda. We're going to be getting to know Big Barda, and she gets a lot more shine in this issue. But as you can tell, some of the punctuation has been cut off here. It's really tight, right? So clearly not framed properly for the final cover back in 1971, and they've fixed that here. And there's some coloring mistakes too, right? Where, Mr. Miracle's teeth are yellow here, where they, typically should be white, right? And there's your example here where they fixed that, right? So to me, as great as the vintage stuff is, and, everything always looks a little bit more faded and the black's not quite as black, there's something I really appreciate about kind of this, I don't want to say fixed version, but remixed version. And the proper framing is definitely something I appreciate. And as we go inside the comic, there's one page. I'll bring this edition back out just for a bit, just for comparison's sake. Because again, I was talking about how online, people like, why don't they reprint them to look like they did in the early 70s when they were originally printed? I have to wonder if maybe, and when I get to that page, I'll compare if maybe, there were just limitations in the printing press back then, and that, how they're reprinting them now is maybe how the artists and the creators and the companies actually intended for those books to look back in 1971. It just wasn't possible because of the printing means that they had at that time, weren't able to really convey the colors like they wanted them to. So online, I'm seeing some debate on this, some Facebook pages that talk about that. I guess it depends on your point of view, but like, once again, when I get to that page, I'll compare it a little bit and I'll talk more about that. Let's have a look inside. So starting off, like I said, right away, we've got Big Barda on that first page. I guess she's doing some calisthenics or yoga here. Not quite sure. As we've seen before with her bikini, not much left to the imagination. And I mean, I feel this is kind of risque, even for the early 70s for Marvel and DC kind of mainstream comics to have a character wear so little. So kudos on Kirby for pushing the limits a little bit on that, right? This is maybe kind of, the 70s precursor to the Image type ladies who are wearing almost nothing, right? But with Big Barda, she's very strong. She's an Amazon warrior woman. So, doesn't necessarily need to be wearing her armor all the time. And obviously she's not, here the context is not any kind of fighting or war or anything. So, she's wearing, I guess, what she's comfortable with. Interesting story about this splash page. These are some of the first few issues inked by Mike Royer, and he's doing such a great job. I love the Mike Royer inks as opposed to what we were getting with Vinnie Coletta before that. Really, really true to the Kirby pencils. But unfortunately, when he originally inked this page, he changed Barda's face a little bit, thinking he was fixing it. And when the pages got back, Kirby found out about it, got really pissed, and said, don't change anything. Don't change, especially not the faces. So this face had been inked by Royer. Kirby actually redrew it, and they cut out the face and put in the new face, and then Royer re-inked that. Kirby Collector is a great resource if you're interested in Jack Kirby and kind of little tidbits about his work and stuff back then. So that's what you want to be looking at. That's where I found that out. And of course, right, we've got the guys kind of checking out Big Barda because, you know, she's a pretty shapely woman. And basically what's going on here is Scott Free, aka Miracle Man, is having a cannon delivered for one of his, you know, death-defying feats. And, you know, these guys are trying to talk about how it's not going to be easy to get this cannon into his yard. And, you know, Barda kind of just barges in, pushes them aside, and, you know, grabs the cannon and lifts it. Just a nice little sequence, really well drawn. And even the shot of her holding it, I think is really cool. Like she's just holding it over her shoulder, like it's not a thing. Really cool. All the men right in the background kind of amazed. And this guy's comments is funny. It's funny to me. You know, this is 1971, but this kind of stuff Kirby throws in that I love. You know, when people shit on Kirby's writing, I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about. This little tidbit is just hilarious. This woman's lib thing is getting more serious than I thought, right? So he's kind of, you know, dumbfounded as to the point at which women have kind of taken, I guess, over some masculine roles or something. All right, this page here, this is the one I wanted to compare because, again, you know, I appreciate the old school printing. I love the nostalgic value of it, the slight yellowing of the paper, the newsprint, right? The fact that, you know, the color sometimes, you know, sits off to the side and is badly aligned. Not on this page necessarily, but, and then when you look up close, you can see all the little bit, you know, dot patterns that compose the image, right? But I feel like, you know, if they had had better means of production back in the day, they would have used them, right? So when we look at the omnibus here, we obviously get less faded colors, but the lines are crisper and cleaner, right? Not quite as, you know, they always fizzle out a little bit. It seems like on the page, like the page is actually drinking in a bit of the ink, right? And it kind of fizzles out. And where you get, you know, with here, obviously you get brighter colors, but I just find you get better definition and color corrections as well. So once again, you know, the white of the eye on Miracle Man, it's kind of fudged here and just red. Wunderbar here, his glasses, or his monocle rather, and his teeth should be white or gray or something similar to that, and they're not, so that's color corrected here. So, you know, what's the best way to look at it? For nostalgic value, yes, obviously I agree, this is what you want, but for actual art appreciation, I do wonder if, you know, if the colors are a little too saturated for some people, I get it, but I feel for clarity of line and just, you know, almost if it was printed this way in black and white, it'd be the best kind of way to present the ink artwork, right? The ink line and stuff. But I just do prefer some of the clarity that we get here. And especially with Mr. Miracle, I do feel like it's a fairly colorful character. So making his colors saturated makes sense. But again, I do like the old school vibe with, you know, the misprinting and the missed areas of color and the little bit of coloring mistakes. So you guys tell me in the comments what you prefer, whether you prefer the re-editions with corrected art and colors, or if you just really like the nostalgic value of the original comics. I'm a bit of both, but for art appreciation, I do think the re-edition, the omnibus, presents the artwork just a little bit better and clearer than what the original book does. So we got a cool shot of Mr. Miracle, who we think of Mr. Miracle here, caught in, again, some sort of Houdini-esque death trap here. The spotted blacks on the ceiling here, not exactly a shadow, but again, just these weird abstract shapes that help frame the characters and kind of contrast and separate the background from the foreground. I think it looks great here. Always works really well. Kirby's a master of that. Just the way he uses the shadows and just weird abstract shapes that, again, when you really pay attention, is a little weird, but just works so well quickly when you're looking at these pages, right? Kirby was a master storyteller and realized, you know, not everything has to be drawn perfectly. It just has to have the impact that you want it to have, right? This little bit of detail, you know, body language of Wunderbar just cleaning out his monocle, I think is great. So they're testing out this new machine, the Centrispin, on Mr. Miracle, right? And then boom, you know, everything kind of explodes, and even sacrifices his henchman there in this experiment. To a certain extent, he's not actually dead, right? But he did receive a lot of the explosion in the face here. And Wunderbar's checking out the result. And what's discussed is that basically this was not the actual Mr. Miracle, as you know, right? It was kind of a life decoy that they used to test it. And now, of course, they're going to want to be testing it on the actual Mr. Miracle. So here we are with Oberon and Scott Free getting the cannon ready for whatever death trap trick he's going to be doing next. You know, there's this weird kind of entertainment side to Mr. Miracle, right? Almost like, you know, he's a more modern day Houdini in the 70s. So the fact that they're using a Civil War cannon, he's got Oberon dressed up like a Civil War reenactor or soldier. So kind of an odd choice. I don't know, you know, what are we now? 55 years later, you know, a lot of times gone by that any of this Civil War stuff would get referenced in modern comics. It was already old when Kirby was referencing it back then. So, and I mean, always that kind of weird bondage aspect to Mr. Miracle, always getting tied up, right? So we go back to Barda, and again, we get kind of a sequence, maybe a little bit of TNA, I guess, for the comic readers back in the day. Barda, you know, just going for a quick swim here as these apocalyptic soldiers kind of sneak up on her, or think they're sneaking up on her. Jeez, can't talk today. But yeah, quickly, you know, she goes from wearing the bikini to her armor, right? The molecular change takes a mere microsecond. Barda's skimpy costume suddenly fills out. It becomes an armored military uniform made for battle, as we talked about earlier. Now that we're in context, she does don her armor here, which looks really cool, and not the cape. So I guess the cape is not part of the armor manifestation. But yeah, I just love the shot here. Really cool. She looks powerful, menacing, right? And it's been redone by, this is a classic image. If you check out Comic Swipes and stuff, John Byrne redid this one, obviously on purpose, right? When he was drawing Big Barda. These different henchmen, right? It depends on the book. It's like these aren't exactly the same henchmen, the parademons. So these guys almost look more like insects to a certain extent. But Kirby always coming up with weird, inventive designs, and sometimes just in one panel, characters we won't see again. Sometimes they're hit or miss, but all these designs here I really just enjoy, and just so Kirby-esque. I love his shorthand for all that stuff. So the cannon is shot, and of course, Mr. Miracle, as usual, gets out of it. We know, this is what I mean about the death trap trope, is eventually we're going to know that he's not really or we're going to assume he's not really in any danger when it comes to these death traps, because he keeps getting out of them, right? Because obviously if he doesn't, well, that's bye-bye to Mr. Miracle and the series. So the only one that's going to continue on from the New Gods anyways when they get canceled. Here's just a point of, I'm just going to compare a little bit here, because as you can see, the original published book, there's a bit of coloring mistake here where some dark tone was thrown in here on his sleeve, which should be red. So I'm just curious if I go back to the re-edition here. Let me just get the right page. It's really hard to find when this volume is like thousands of pages, literally. Okay, I'm getting closer. Let's see. Almost there. I'm just curious if they corrected that kind of stuff. It seems like they did, you know, on the cover in the previous pages. So yeah, this is what I mean, right? So again, I feel like this is what, whether you like it or not in the re-edition, this is what they actually, let me make sure the camera picks that up so the sleeve is red. This is what the original creators probably intended, and in their heads, what they kind of wanted the books to look like. But again, printing means we're limited back then, and this is what you got, right? Always thought the astro discs are a pretty clever way to get Mr. Miracle to fly around. You know, I've talked about how the Black Racer, I think, is kind of inspired or coming from the same place as the Silver Surfer. It doesn't work quite as well as the Silver Surfer himself, where here with these astro discs and Mr. Miracle, I find that works a lot more. And Mr. Miracle, I'm sure I've said it before, but really just a more modern reinterpretation of Stuntman from the late 30s, early 40s that Kirby worked on. not literally the same character, but his design is very similar, even though this seems more modernized for the early 70s, right? But the same kind of tropes. Again, stuntman. Haven't read those issues, but definitely, you know, someone who was getting, as a stuntman, out of death traps and things like that. I love these extreme foreshortened shots, right, of this kind of facility that Mr. Miracle is approaching here, right? The quick angle there, the crop of it, right? So you show just enough that, you know, you understand what it is. And finally, we're here with the murder machine. And this is kind of maybe the first sequence that we see on the cover there of him getting all clamped up in this Iron Maiden type thing. And then whoop, everything starts up. You know, you got a conveyor belt pulling him into the murder machine. And then all sorts of things, right? These elements here I feel are inspired by, you know, those machines they throw like cars and metals in, and the gears are kind of turning and they just chop everything up and destroy it. I feel like that's what the inspiration for that is. Over here, very unfortunate, we've got some studded dildos that are gonna belong and clong into Mr. Miracle here. Then we've got the flamethrowers, I believe, right? So Mr. Miracle, once again, just getting hammered from all angles here in the murder machine. So they got Barda and they got her tied up here. Obviously, not quite sure what's going to go on there, but can't be good, right? And all these sequences here, I love like the textures and the bubbling water, you know, the beat up kind of nature of the Iron Maiden that's been hit with the dildos and stuff. It's really cool, very Kirby-esque. And then as they're all laughing about it, Mr. Miracle already appears behind him, right? And they're obviously very surprised by that. And just kind of a weird sequence where he lets himself kind of be checked out here by these paratroopers or parademons. I'm not quite sure what they're calling them in this issue. And then, of course, you know, just like every other issue, Mr. Miracle explains how he got out of the death trap. We see this pretty cool worm's eye view where we see the underside of his shoes. So again, a convenient kind of Deus Ex Machina kind of thing. That's usually what happens with Mr. Miracle. Mother Box saves him, or some kind of technological device saves him, which makes sense in the sense if you're thinking he's like Houdini. He's an escape artist, right? You know, there's no actual magic involved in those escapes. It really comes down to having the right tool to get yourself out of it, right? A lock pick or whatever it is, depending on the death trap, right? Yeah, so basically he blasted out of it like very much near the beginning of the whole sequence. So anything that happened after that, he wasn't in there and wasn't being affected by it. Below ground, I worked fast. My foot blasters hollowed out a tunnel, which allowed me to passage and complete cover. So yeah, again, a very convenient technological device under his boots. I really like this shot of him crouched down though, and you know, angling his boots towards the area where he wants to blast that tunnel out. And even here, this up close kind of from the back 3/4, you know, foreground shot of him here, just enough that we recognize him, creates just that extra level of depth in this image, which has no backgrounds, right? So kind of interesting, right? That all of a sudden, you know, Jack Kirby not known for cheaping out on backgrounds, just one big panel where there aren't any, but that's okay. He throws so much into all the other panels that I don't have a problem with that. Of course, everyone, you know, falls through the hole here in the floor that Mr. Miracle has created, right? And saves Barda, and off they go, right? Scott, forgive me. I was afraid for us. I, a warrior, right? You're better than that, Barda. You're a woman. I love these crazy lines that Kirby writes that to me really stick in your head and are kind of very memorable. That's another example of it. I just love that panel there. This whole panel here is just super fun. The image of it and the dialogue within as well. And that's basically it. And, you know, very often we've got a next issue blurb here. I'll just read it because I really like next issue and I can't wait to look at it. You know him. I know him. Everyone gets to know Funky Flashman. The question is, do we need him? This can become a desperate issue if a Funky Flashman can decide your fate. Watch Mr. Miracle get taken by the con man, the funkiest agent of them all. Now, back in 1971, you don't know who he's talking about here. Next issue, if you know a little bit about Marvel lore, maybe you know who it is, but most people didn't. Later on, it came out and it became common knowledge in the comics community that Funky Flashman is actually Jack Kirby's kind of interpretation of Stan Lee, right? And I won't give you too many details because I'll be reviewing the next issue in a little while, and I'll get into detail and focus on that when I do. But it's definitely a very interesting issue, and definitely gives us a huge insight into how Jack Kirby perceives Stan Lee. This is fun. We get a young Scott Free story. It's hard for me to tell here. I feel like maybe Mike Royer did not ink this. I'm not 100% sure, but it starts to feel a little bit more like the Coletta stuff, where you get some more old school kind of 60s type hatching, and then he does kind of do the squiggly lines, but it doesn't quite, you know, register or come through as well as when Mike Royer does it. So I suspect that Coletta inked this, and one of the last bits he probably did, other than the fact that he stays on his inker on the Jimmy Olsen series. Everything else is taken up by Mike Royer, thankfully. But Kirby can't find it in himself to completely fire Vinny off the book. So still doing Jimmy Olsen. And maybe this was done, you know, before Mike Royer came along. So Coletta was still inking all the books at that point, I suspect anyways. So this is a little bit of Scott Free's past, when he was basically, you know, being raised by Granny Goodness on Apocalypse. You know, it's a dystopian society. So basically, you know, everyone's put in together, and no one is more special than anyone else, right? It's kind of a communist kind of vibe. Jack Kirby, having fought the war and knowing the evils of the Nazis, but then also during the Cold War of the 50s, you know, Russia, communism was a huge enemy. So still influencing the stories here in the 70s, as Russia is still, quote unquote, a menace to the United States back then, and vice versa, I guess. The States a menace to Russia. But some of this dialogue I just love, right? Heads up to dark side, hearts out to Granny Goodness. What else, boys? Tell Granny the rest. The punishment block is the throne of truth. Scott Free must be freed of lies, right? So he's done something wrong, and he's got to be punished, basically. I was derelict in duty and a traitor to the tradition. Again, I love this dialogue. And Granny Goodness takes out some sort of electrified dildo. I'm not sure if it's electrified, but it just it looks like a dildo to me. I don't think Kirby intended it that way. Probably thought it was more just a baton or some, you know, but definitely looks like she's smacking around with a dick and a dildo, which is kind of funny. And you start to see a little bit of the result of that, right? You got some wounds here on his chin here. And as we go through the issue, we'll be getting more of that. Basically, just, again, Scott Free being punished by his cohorts and by the denizens of Apocalypse, and under the tutelage of Granny Goodness. And here it's kind of like the that episode of The Simpsons, right? Oh, man. The stonemasons, the stone cutters, right? Where Homer joins them, and there's they call it the gauntlet, right? Where he has to walk through, and as he's walking through, all these guys are hitting him with their sticks here. And, you know, this is something pretty rare to me. I really appreciate Kirby showing all this damage on the face. I don't feel like when he was at Marvel, many characters would ever kind of be represented that way after a fight, right? They're all kind of superheroes, and they got powers. They heal really fast, so you know, maybe it wasn't well seen for kids comics to have the character be beaten up to this level. So I really appreciate seeing it here. I love it here too, as well as kind of foreshadowing it, right? Lots of shadows on his face, but you're like, man, there's really something wrong with his face here. And then getting a good glimpse of it here. And we've got Metron all of a sudden materializing here. So you're the one, the young one called Scott Free. I'm Metron, and among other things, I've always wondered about your existence. I've never seen your kind before. You must be one of Darkseid's hierarchy. So Metron, you know, kind of an in-between character if we're talking about, you know, New Gods and Apocalypse politics. He's neither on the side of the New Gods, neither on the side of Darkseid. He kind of plays both sides constantly, or at least tries to stay out of it as much as possible. He's just interested in knowledge. So he's kind of that morally ambiguous character that, you know, we don't get a lot of in these 60s and 70s comics. So Kirby was definitely working on a different level here. And, you know, as unsubtle as some aspects of his books are, there's subtlety in the characterization and the relationships of the characters between each other in the New Gods that we hadn't quite yet seen in comics back then. So I definitely appreciate that. And then, of course, we've got a classic Kirby reprint here. Now, again, I mentioned Stuntman kind of being the precursor of Mr. Miracle. So I don't know if DC doesn't own the license to Stuntman, because it would have made sense to have Stuntman reprints here. So I suspect that's why we don't. And they get replaced here by Boy Commando reprints, which really relate to Mr. Miracle in no way at all. At least in the other books, right? When we're talking about Jimmy Olsen, we've got the Newsboy Legion and Guardian, right? The newer versions of them introduced in those modern, at the time, 70s comics. So to reprint the old school Newsboy Legion stuff in that book really makes sense to me. But this here, not so much. Doesn't really relate to the title character in any way, really. The only reason it's here is because it's a Kirby book from the Golden Age that they can reprint. And as I've said before, I'm not going to go through those too much, because it's not really what interests me about these issues. And when you look at the omnibus, right, they don't have that in there, because really it doesn't relate to the story at all. It was really, again, an excuse to add more pages to the book and charge more to the kids back then. You do get a little bit of the Guardians and the Newsboy Legion here, which is fun. And then, you know, I guess early kind of crossover or continuity in the comics that Kirby was creating. You've got Sandman and I forget his Sandy, I think is his sidekick's name. So early on, the idea that all these characters do exist in the same world and the same continuity already being established by Kirby here. So that's fun, but other than that, not what we're here to look at. I mean, look at some of the more kind of DC house style art that we've got back in 1971, right? Not that this is bad art in any way. It's just not very exciting. It's very DC house style. And horror comics were starting to get really popular in the early 70s. So you see some kind of weird horror tropes being applied to Superman, like horror and Superman. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's not something I would typically think of doing and incorporating into Superman stories. Maybe more science fiction stuff or mythology, but horror, here's Superman kind of as almost like the Headless Horseman. Kind of an odd choice, right? The ghost that haunted Clark Kent. So yeah, turning Superman into a horror book. Not sure how successful that was. Probably not very much, because we don't hear about those issues much today. All right, well, there you go, guys. That is my review of Mr. Miracle issue number 5 from Jack Kirby's Fourth World Epic. If you're still watching and you are subscribed to the channel, I really do appreciate your support. Thank you so much. If you're watching but you're not subscribed, please do so below. It only takes a quick second for you. It really helps the channel out, helps us grow, and helps get us out there to other people who are into comic books, just like we are. Trying to get some more watch hours to hit that next milestone, guys. So if you appreciate the channel, it'd really help me out if you watched a few more videos and threw in some extra watch hours so I can hit that next milestone and get the channel moving ahead even further. So check out my comic books, Big Baby and STARCRASHER, at KIngCOMICS.CA. Everyone out there, thanks again for watching, and have yourselves an awesome day. King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13, 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents STARCRASHER one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at KingComics.CA, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby. Like!